Let's dive in, because I want to make sure we get nice.
No, absolutely. So let's start with Kierkegaard. Kierkegaard's major project is against Hegel. I'm glad I talked about Hegel last time, because Hegel's big thing is this issue of objectivity. Hegel believes that he can come to the absolute. Remember, you have the concrete, the abstract, and the absolute. And the absolute is the same thing as objectivity for Hegel. And
you guys always take my spots, man.
Yeah.
I guess I should just leave the professor his corner, because I was sitting there.
Well, if you
I got
to
to sit in the uncomfortable.
We don't have a chair. You want to sit here?
There's another chair there.
Yeah, it's just not as comfortable as the couch.
Okay, Chris,
it's okay here. Yes.
I actually prefer that chair right there.
Do you?
Okay.
All right.
So you have the movements from concrete, abstract, to absolute. And then you have this issue of objectivity.
Should we grab the book so we can have it on hand for underlining, or are you just objectively doing your thing?
I'm going to do my thing, and then I'll take questions in the second half. So if you want to underline as we go...
Well, I already did when I did the reading. Is what
so that's fine.
Is this a discussion with the reading, or are you teaching us? And then
I'm gonna do half teaching in the beginning, and then half let's talk about the reading.
Okay.
Right, so that's what we agreed on last time.
So I should go get a notes and get ready to take notes. And
yeah, if you want to do that.
All right. Yeah, well, of course I do. I'm entertaining right now.
Rob,
so give me a minute to set up here.
Sure. And don't worry about it, because Rob has it all on tape, so you can go back and look at it too. So I'm just going to continue. So you have objectivity. If you have any questions, you can ask them in the middle too.
If I'm trying to fit as much in, so I can go with it.
You've got an hour.
Okay.
Sorry. I have limited time.
So you have objectivity. So objectivity is what we usually mean by objectivity. That is something that's real as opposed to subjectivity, right? Which is subject to your own individual lens. Now that's especially true if you go back from Hegel to Kant. And Kant is all about the lens. It's all about subjectivity. And you also have to understand this is inside the movement towards the movement of modernity, which moves from pre-modernity. Pre-modernity or classical philosophical understandings are focused on the real, the world, the cosmos. It's a cosmocentric philosophy. So if you want to know what wisdom is, right, that's what philosophy means literally, is philos, sophos. Philos is love, like a brotherly love. You have Philadelphia, which is the city of brotherly love. And then you have sophos, or Sophia, which is wisdom. So for Plato, you have the one who is wise is the one who loves wisdom. So when you're talking about a classical orientation, a classical philosophical orientation, or classical theological orientation, that orientation is focused on the real, the true, the world, cosmos, also known as universe, right? Cosmos is Greek, universera is Latin. But it's the same thing. The universe, the entirety of reality, the ordered reality, which is cosmos, which is contrasted to chaos, which is just a big mess, right? So, the classical understanding focused on the world, the cosmos, right? And in a Christian key, cosmos is nature, right? What God makes, creation, okay? And if you are a classical philosopher, you are focused on nature. And somewhat interestingly, even if you're focused on the gods, in a kind of backdoor kind of way, you're focused on nature. Why? If you look at the Greco-Roman gods, what are they? Many of them are personifications of natural forces. Poseidon is the ocean, right? Zeus is the sky, right? Hades is the earth and under the earth, right? Gaia is the living earth. But the ball of rock, and then what's underneath it is Hades. It's the underworld, right? The forces of death, the forces also where wealth comes from. If you move Hades into the Latin key, you get Pluto. And I talked about this a little bit. I'm tying back up to political theory. But remember, I was talking about oligarchy is a plutocracy. Plutocracy is ruled by the wealthy. Why? Because Pluto, the realm of Pluto, is where you get gold and silver, under the earth. That's where riches come from. So, back to this issue. the classical or pre-modern world, the pre-modern philosophical understanding, is focused on nature. And then beyond that, nature's God, right? You can see that language even in our Declaration of Independence. Nature and nature's God. That's very modern, but moving from classical to modern. When you get to the modern world, sorry, I'm circling back around to subjectivity. When you get to the modern world, it's called, I've used this term before, it's called the anthropocentric turn. The turn away from the cosmos towards man. Man is the measure. That's an ancient philosopher, Democritus, but he can be the standard bearer for the modern world because you move away from the cosmos, nature, the world as it is, to the world as man sees it. Man is the center. Man is the measure. It's called the anthropocentric turn, but it's also the move to subjectivity. The subject, the human subject, is the center. So you have this subjectivity. And the subjectivity you can see in, again, going all the way back to the founder or the grandfather of modernity, which is Descartes. After Descartes is Hume. After Hume, you have Kant. So there, you can see this as kind of a Hegelian movement. You have thesis, Descartes, the mind and the body are separate. Hume, or matter and form are separate. Right? The mind and the body, matter and form. But remember that's cosmos written small already. We're talking about matter and form is what Aristotle will talk about, which is cosmocentric, right? Which is the whole universe. Everything has matter and everything has form. The planets have matter, the stars have matter, the plants and the animals have matter. But when you get to Descartes, who cares about plants and animals? It's man, right? You have matter and form, which is the mind and the body. Doesn't care about animals and the earth and the whatever. Human beings is the center. That's the center of focus in Descartes. When you get to Descartes, so you have mind and body. So from there, mind and body becomes Hume. Hume decides, well, the mind, you can't measure it. Empiricism, right? This is the whole analytic school of philosophy, if you know what analytic school of philosophy is. That's the British kind of, everything can be measured. Everything is a matter of empiricism. You can see it, you can measure it, you can make mathematical triangles with it. And the analytic school kind of departs, especially when you see in Hume, from the idea that there is anything immaterial. The mind doesn't really exist, although they use the mind to understand. We won't talk about that. But the mind really doesn't exist, and all there is the body. Everything can be measured. This is the modern day identity theory. It's called the brain is the mind and the mind is the brain, right? So if you want to find where the mind is, it's in between your ears. Period. That's it. You get brain firings. That's the mind. So with Hume, you have a total negation of the immaterial world. To move yourself back from that, Kant wants to recover some of that immaterial stuff, especially vis-a-vis morality, as you were talking about before. Remember, Nick? He wants to bring that back. He wants to introduce a new synthesis that has room for immaterial things, like the moral good. The moral good can't be measured. You can't pull out a tape and say, I have 1.5 moral goods and you have 3.7 moral goods, right? It's not an empirical object. And because Kant wants that stuff, among other things, he kind of reintroduces this issue of subjectivity. Because in the world in which the only thing that is objective is what can be measured and what can be seen and heard and tasted, right? You have to bring in subjectivity again. What you have with Hegel is, again, the movement back towards, quote-unquote, objectivity. He takes the radical subjectivity of Kant and the place of the human being, and then he moves it back to what can we know about the universe. Again, that's the absolute and objectivity again. So that's our setup for Kierkegaard. Sorry, the big setup for Kierkegaard. Kierkegaard's the movement, again, back towards subjectivity. Because you have objectivity recaptured with Hegel. Hegel has this idea of, you have concreteness, that is some individual particular thing. You have abstraction. So the concreteness is an individual human being, David Hawkes. You have abstraction, which is the idea of humanity, right? My idea of what humanness is. And then absolute, you have human beings as they are, through some kind of scientific study especially, maybe an anthropological or sociological understanding of what humanness is about. What Kierkegaard wants to do against that, because he thinks that's phony and incomplete, and he's right as far as it goes, he wants to recover the individual human being and say the individual human being is more important than this kind of objective, phony understanding of humanness. Because this phony understanding of humanness is going to trample all our individuality underneath it. You will no longer be individual hawks or boring or Villalobos, right? You're going to be just part of this kind of mass of humanity, and you're going to be treated like a number, you're going to be treated like a statistic.
Who's this?
This is Kierkegaard. So Kierkegaard wants to go away from that, especially when he analyzes religion, because he has a big attack on Christendom, right? He believes in Jesus, but he's against Christendom. And remember, he's against the church already. He's a Lutheran. The church's gone. There's no church. This is Protestantism. You know, it's not, there isn't the top-down understanding of you have the apostles, and they have truth, and they impart the truth to the bishops. And the bishops, you know, in conjunction with the people, in the sense of the faithful, sensus fidelium, right? We embody the truth, right? We stay in the family of God. That exists to some degree in Protestantism, but it's rejected because the idea is, quite initially, Kierkegaard continues it, but along the lines of a kind of this Lutheran instinct of, well, this mass church is not responsive to the individual needs of the individual Christian. And it's interested in politics, it's interested in money, it's interested in power, and it's not interested in the particular individual faith of the individual believer. So you've rejected the church. And what happens historically, when the church is rejected, especially in Denmark, what replaces is the state church, right? And so you have the official Church of Denmark, right? And the Church of Denmark is the Lutheran Church, and the Lutheran Church is the Church of Denmark in his particular context. So what you have is this kind of church-state blend. And the church-state blend is what he rejects as phony, for all the same reasons that Luther rejected the Catholic Church. Because he thought it was interested in worldly power, which is to some degree true. He thought it was interested in the particularities of any individual ruler, like the Pope, right, and their particular sins and their particular predilections, and not in the faith, right? But remember, the faith comes not from the community in a Protestant structural sense. It comes from every individual, and from the Bible, sort of. But again, only the Bible you want, not the Bible you don't want. If you don't want the deuterocanonical books, rip them out, throw them away. Why? Does Luther have the authority to do that? No way in hell. But he thought he did. Why? Because it messed with his theology. You know, Maccabees has purgatory in it. Rip it out. James says faith is dead without works. Get rid of it. So, sorry, a little foray into theology here, but it's very relevant for Kierkegaard, okay? Because Kierkegaard, again, wants to recover what he sees as radical subjectivity. And in that sense, Nietzsche is very much his student, okay? Nietzsche is not a theist, right? But Nietzsche is also a Lutheran, or at least comes from a Lutheran background, because there's a rejection of nature and there's a rejection of reason, right? Luther is anti-intellectual. That's what Luther is. He's a nominalist. And what nominalists really are nihilists. It all comes from Occam, okay? William of Occam is a medieval version of Luther. And what Occam wants to attack, interestingly enough, is the idea that we know things, right? The classical way of knowing something is being able to place it in an actual category that we can understand. Okay, so let's go backtrack to Plato and Aristotle. When you know something, you know it because you see that it's a member of a natural kind. Okay? This is most evident in organisms. How do I know you, Rob, are Rob? How do I know? I see you, right? and I put you in a category. But I don't do that willy-nilly. I don't do that just as a pure act of the will. I want to put Rob in the category of television sets. No. Right? I observe Rob. I figure out what Rob does. I understand Rob's powers. And I say, Rob, you're a rational animal, right? That's what you are, right? You have all these animal powers. We talked about this before, 3 types of soul, right? At the bottom, you have the vegetative soul. In the middle, you have the animated soul or the sentient soul, right? Sometimes in modern parlance, we use sentient as a synonym to intelligent. But there's a difference between sense and intelligence, right? Sense, a dog has sense. A dog does not have intelligence the same way you and I have intelligence. It has something maybe analogous to intelligence, something that functions in its own sphere like our intelligence functions. And in some ways you can say they're intelligent. But they're not intelligent in the way that they're going to do math problems. You know? They're not going to do algebra. I'm sorry, that's the end of it. You can cry all you want, you can call it cry speciesism, you can call it foul. Yeah. God made it that way. Suck it up, people, that's the way it really is, right? If you think dog can do algebra problems, good luck. Try and have dogs make fucking airplanes, right? Put them in Boeing and see if they fucking become airplane engineers. No, not going to happen. Okay, so above that you have the intellectual, right? That is the rational animal, the one that has all the powers of those organisms below it in the order of creation, and has the power to understand, to know, right? And then even beyond knowledge in the Christian understanding, that is the Catholic understanding prior to Luther, we have faith. But in a very large sense, this is something of an exaggeration, but in a very large sense, Luther replaces reason with faith. And you can see this in Kierkegaard. And how you can see this in Kierkegaard is the 3 levels. And this is all just basic Kierkegaard stuff. I don't know how much it parallels to the reading, because I will be fully honest, I did not read my 2nd chapter. But this is all good Kierkegaard stuff that will help you understand.
That's what I was wondering. Is Kierkegaard introduced in the 2nd chapter?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
There's mostly Nietzsche in this.
He was talking about myth and
He does talk about Kierkegaard at the end. Like, there's like
I didn't read the very end.
Okay.
He was mainly talking about what's that god's name?
It's Apollo versus Dionysus.
Oh, Dionysus! I can do the whole thing on that too.
Yeah.
He
was talking about myth versus what is it?
Logos. Mythos and logos are the 2 in Plato, anyway.
He didn't mention that.
He was talking about the birth of tragedy.
Okay.
We talked about all of Nietzsche's books.
Okay.
All of his big works.
Okay, so we can get to Nietzsche, Dionysus, and Apollo too.
That's what it is. Dionysus.
Yeah.
Myth versus what is it?
I don't know.
It's like a mythology idea of God versus a.
So it's like those are both like myths. They're like Apollo is like the god of like
reason and light and music.
But one's about nature and one's about
Dionysus
revelation.
Oh, nature
one's
and
about
revelation.
the natural version of myth, and one's about Christ being the light from outside of the nature. Mystery versus myth.
Mystery versus myth. Okay. That's revelation. Okay, that's also relevant to Kierkegaard when we get to Kierkegaard next chapter.
Kierkegaard's in this chapter, but he's at the end of this chapter.
Well, that's faith versus reason.
Right. It is. Yes, that's right. That's right.
Because you can only get so far to a theist point of view with reason.
Sure, you can.
You can't get to the God of Revelation.
Sure, that's right. But you can get to the God that is naturally accessible, and that's the big thing here. Again, with both Kierkegaard and Luther before him, is to a great degree, faith replaces reason. Okay, and that's not a Catholic position, by the way.
So Protestantism makes sense now from this point of view.
Okay.
No, I mean I'm just trying to process as you're saying because Protestantism dismisses intellectual.
That's right. It's
from
not
faith life.
That's nothing. That doesn't.
And says that your mind is not even able to comprehend.
But that's very
the experience, the personal experience.
Yeah, that's exactly what they believe.
It's also this whole move. I'm just seeing the parallels of what you're saying between universal classical understanding of the human person,
right,
which is where Christ fulfills it and the church embraces it and is very Christologic, but also in the sense of the maker of the cosmos.
Yeah, cosmological,
in the classical cosmological, in light of Christ, in light of God.
That's right.
Breathing.
That's right.
Inspiring,
that's right. Sure.
Versus Protestantism being, I don't need these grandiose, big things. I just need my own experience.
Sure, it's a leap
no
of
one can
faith.
tell me. You know what I mean?
It's a leap of faith. Here's the issue. Let's go to Kierkegaard. This is directly Kierkegaardian, right? The leap of faith. We have a leap of faith too, but we have a bridge of reason. Okay, if you think about the chasm between, you think about the chasm between us and God, right? So if you think about this chasm, or maybe to be more biblical, if you think of the chasm between perdition, right, and salvation, the one with Lazarus, or the myth of Lazarus, you have on one side the rich man who's not named, right, who's in torment, right, and Lazarus in the bosom of Abraham, right, which is not quite heaven, but it's close, okay, or it pretty much, it's heaven for the Jews at that time. Let's just leave it there, okay, well, it's not our heaven, right, we have a different kind of more full heaven because we have more stuff, and we have more revelation, we have more scripture, and we have more reflection on that scripture.
Jesus.
That's right there. Because Jesus, when Jesus is speaking, he's not speaking to an audience who understands that he's revelation, right? He's speaking to an audience that's Jewish, so they're gonna understand the eschaton, the fullness of all reality, the end times, right? The fulfillment of all things, the unity, the new heaven and new earth, to quote Revelation, right? They're going to understand that in this way, and the bosom of Abraham is this place of comfort, this place of happiness, but it's not as intense as the Christian heaven because Christ hadn't come, right? He had come, but the audience didn't know, right? None of the audience, including the apostles, with the apostle exception of the Virgin Mary, no one knew that Jesus was the Messiah, right? Now, Peter can proclaim it, but he doesn't understand what that means until the resurrection, right? Because he hasn't experienced it yet. He has an anticipatory understanding. He was Jesus' best friend and lieutenant. So among the people who know, while he's around, he's pretty high on the list. But he still had not experienced the resurrection, and he had not experienced the Pentecost, right? Because even after the resurrection, they're hiding and trembling in the corner.
I wonder what's going on.
What the hell, right? We're going to die. The Jews are going to come kill us. Right? For fear of the Jews, they locked the doors. Right? That's not God has been revealed, screw the world. That's later. We're sorry, we're at the Sanhedrin, we know you have all due respect, guys, but we're going to follow God and not you. Right? That's the Acts of the Apostles. Right? Peter's talking back to the high priest. So,
They're not talking back.
You can beat us, that's fine, but we're going to say what we need to say, right? Because God compels us. That's Peter.
Power of Christ compels.
That's right. Not only the power of the cross, but the power of the Holy Spirit, right?
Power of Christ.
That's right, the power of Christ, right? The Spirit of Christ, who has anointed the apostles. So,
I don't believe in all that.
no, who believes in that? Weirdos. So,
You guys are freaks.
I know. So back to Kierkegaard and the three levels. You have the aesthetic man, right? The aesthetic man is the man of the senses. He wants things that are beautiful, things that are melodious, things that are harmonious, right? That's the aesthetic human being, the human being who wants this symphony of existence, right? He wants things that are pleasing to the eyes and the ears. Again, the sensual man, right? The aesthetic man, the aesthete, right? On the next level, you have the moral man, and the moral man is the will, right? Back to Plato, right? You have the appetites. The cessation of the appetites comes with beauty, right? You are a man, right? And you have a penis, and there are all these vaginas out there, and you're like, oh, I must go and match my penis with one of these vaginas, right? Because they're walking around, and that's what they're for, right? That's what your penis thinks. That's how penis is about. And your eyes, they see this, right? And they're like, I like these things. Let me go find some naked one of those things, right? Because that's what we're down with. So how do you get cessation? You get cessation by, copulation, right? And consummation, right? So that consummation means oneness, right? Con means with, and summa is, right? Sum. Cogito ergo sum. Back to Descartes. I think, therefore I am. Right?
Not I experience, therefore I am.
Right? No. I think, therefore I am. But the I am is the part here. Summation, right, is I want existence with this, right? The Bible says the two became one flesh, right? Okay? So, That's the aesthetic man. He wants this, right? And what do you get out of it? That with that artistic movement, you get cessation of the desire, satiation of the desire, right? This desire for beauty ends in this act which brings forth new life, right? So you have the procreative act. Now, at the next level, you have the moral man. And the moral man seeks the good, right? You have evil in the world, right? You must overcome it. And in order to overcome it, you must fight, right? The moral fight. You must run the race, Paul says, right? And edify, build up the brethren, right? And how do you do that? You do every good thing. No good thing is against God, right? I'm quoting Romans or Corinthians here, but so that's what the end is there. At the top, in the Platonic world, you have knowledge and nature. That's what you want, right? You want to know what a human being is. You want to go for what a human being is for. And what happens with Kierkegaard is he skips into a theological key, right? Because reason, unreliable. Knowledge, unknown, right? Knowledge is phony, especially the knowledge that comes from Hegelian philosophy. In a certain sense, Kierkegaard cannot reach back into the Middle Ages and pick up Aquinas and Augustine, because he's gone beyond that. You hear people talk about this.
That's what the text talks about. You want to go beyond.
Right. So he wants. So you find people in the modern world, especially atheists. They have this idea that history is inevitability. It's very Hegelian too, right? You roll forward, you never go backwards. Well, why not? Right? This is what Chesterton, to make fun of all this, says, what are you talking about? That's exactly what you do. If you make a mistake, you go back, and then you go on the road that makes sense. You don't just keep going off the freaking cliff.
It's progressivism at any cost.
Yes, that's right. That's right. We're progressing, but we don't know where we're progressing to. Right? So you hear this nonsense like LGBTQ, RSV, LMOP, Overfell has happened. Don't be on the wrong side of this kind of garbage. Wrong side of history. What do you mean, wrong side of history?
It's already happened.
Right, well, it's happened, but why can't you go back, right? If you screw up, you go backwards, and you start where you made sense again. Right? That's what every normal human being in their normal course of their own individual life does. They don't just keep going until they're obliterated.
So Kierkegaard is a hardcore experience guy?
Oh, yeah. Existentialism. This is theist existentialism as opposed to atheist existentialism. All right, so you have this leap of faith. And so the difference between Kierkegaard and the Catholic tradition is that he leaps over the whole chasm because there's no reason to get him halfway there or however, even 10% of the way there or 90, or it depends on how reasonable you are, right? I mean, this is in part why I call Protestantism religion for stupid people. The stupider you are, the more this makes sense. Because you can't build any bridges because you don't understand anything. So it's all a jump into the darkness and God will save me.
It's crazy, man. It's almost like a laziness. It's like a laziness thing.
Well, it's
a denial of your humanity.
Sure it is. And your reason. That's the big thing. And your reason. But not just your reason, everything else. Right? Remember, Protestants are also iconoclasts. Right? It's not that they don't want you to have a mind, they also don't want you to have a body. You can't smell things, you can't see things, you can't hear things.
So they're Descartes.
In some ways, yes. But they anticipate him. The Reformation is an anticipation of modernity. Modernity is really just a secularization of not Catholicism, but Protestantism. Because by this time, in terms of trends, Catholicism is withdrawing. Right? It no longer is politically important. It lost the wars of religion.
So what do you have? Can you say that again? Protestants are also anti-body.
Yeah.
So you said no body.
Right.
What else did you say?
Because they're iconoclasts.
They're iconoclasts. They don't want images. They don't want the eyes. Right? Ears, music is a little bit more palatable to Protestants.
As long as it's rock.
Well, yeah. Well, it's not going to...
Or back then, as long as it was hardcore hymns.
Yeah, right. But music is kind of the exception to the rule. But they don't want smells, right? They don't want bells. They don't want smells, right? They don't want any of that. Out, out, out. They don't want taste, right? There's no sacrifice on the altar. It's symbolism, symbolism, symbolism. I believe that you are truly Christ, the Son of the living God, who came into the world to save sinners, of whom I am the first. That's right from the Divine Liturgy. Can you imagine Protestants saying something like that? No way!
It's right out of the Bible. It's Paul.
But there's nothing goes on at the altar. It's a remembrance service. It's not a sacrifice.
It's a memorial service.
So is this how you're tying into mystery?
Yeah, we could go to mystery now. We're done with Kierkegaard and the religious man here, because again, we jump over reason, we get to faith. Okay, I'm doing a lot of Kierkegaard. Let's go back to Dionysus and Apollo and Nietzsche. Okay, so now
Let's do it.
all right. So
Dionysius.
But I think right now, other than Karl Marx, I think Nietzsche's like my favorite atheist right now.
Nietzsche's hardcore. So back to Nietzsche. Okay, so you have Nietzsche, you have reason, and then you have mystery. And I think the way I would record this idea of the dark mysteries of Dionysus, right? He's the night, and Apollo is the day, right? It's very simple this way. Now, I have a very interesting Greek mythological argument against Nietzsche, but it's kind of complicated. But so you have Apollo, and Apollo is the god of reason, and he's the god of light, right? The sun. Right? He's the god of music. Why? Because it's harmonious, right? And beautiful, right? So he's the god of three Platonic things. Truth, or reality, right? Which can be seen by the light. And goodness, right? And beauty, right? Apollo is not Aphrodite, but he's understood as the god of beauty too, right? You ever look at statues of Apollo, he's very beautiful. Why? Because the light shines in the darkness, right? So what do you have on the flip side of this? You have the mystery. And the mystery is the dark side, right? The god of drunkenness, Dionysus, right? The Bacchian, where that's the Latin version of Dionysus, is Bach. Bacchus.
Is that where the term debauchery comes from?
Yes. Bacchus is the god of wine and revelry, right? And orderless sex, right? Orgies. That's what that's all about. But no, the light of day is Apollo, right? That's reason, that's structure, right? That's cosmos. And on the other side, you have chaos, the giant mess, the creative destruction. It's maybe not all that creative, but at least in Nietzsche's mind, it is, right? Because he sees that as a beautiful and opening to the divine, as he understands it. Although he doesn't really believe in the divine, at least not in a Christian sense. Now, one of the ways in which I think you can understand this, and this is my own personal insight, is that I think that the three levels of Plato are repeated in the divine world, or repeated in the register of grace, if you like. In nature, you have the eros, which governs the appetites, right? And then above eros, you have the will, the chest, right? I'm moving to the bottom of the analogy, but the three stages. So stage one is the appetite. Stage two is the will. What does the appetites want? They want cessation, right? What does the will want? It wants conquest. It wants whatever is in front of you to be overcome. They're overcomers. That's the Ubermensch, the overman, the superman, the one who conquers. Not for any reason, by the way, because there's no reason in Nietzsche either. It's all Dionysus, right? It's not Apollo. There's no reason. At the top here, you have reason. Why do you conquer? To protect, for example. I've given this quote to Rob before about soldiers. The soldier fights not because he hates what's in front of him. The soldier fights because he loves what's behind him. Right? That's the only legitimate reason to go to war. Why? Because you have shit to protect. Not shit. People to protect. right?
So is this a what versus why question?
I wouldn't say that so much, although there isn't a why in Nietzsche, right?
So who's his opponent? So you have Nietzsche with all this mystery, debauchery, orgies, drunkenness,
Sure.
no
And
reason.
his opponent here would be Plato. I mean, that's who he recognizes as his opponent.
All right, Plato.
Now, you can say all Christianity comes with that, too, because remember, Christianity is Platonized from the beginning with Paul, right? And remember also, this the anti-Platonism that you see in Christianity, and especially the anti-Aristotelianism you see in Christianity, is pretty much all Protestant. Because they're anti-intellectual, and they reject universals, which is the whole point of Plato and Aristotle. Universals.
Universal truth.
That's right.
That's crazy, man. But it's crazy hearing like Kierkegaard and Nietzsche, how they both.
Well,
They both
remember,
cut out that
sure,
reason.
sure, but remember, Nietzsche is a great student of Kierkegaard. Kierkegaard comes first, and Nietzsche follows, although he just atheizes it, right? You have theism and atheism, but it's the same God that's being atheized. The God of no reason.
It's crazy. Yeah, because they're reading an excerpt out of one of his books where he like talks about like Dionysus as his god, basically.
Mm-hmm.
It makes.
Well, I don't understand because Kierkegaard wrote The Sickness Unto Death, and I used that in my thesis
Sure.
as a really good thing.
Sure, it's a good thing.
To end despair. He talks about how only God can end your
Sure, but that jumps over reason. Right? Because it's a direct link to God. You don't talk about nature. You don't talk about your responsibilities to others. You don't talk about you're a rational animal. You don't talk about the fact you have a responsibility to courage. Right? That's what Aristotle and Aquinas and Augustine and everybody else would talk about in addition to God.
Well, they didn't really believe in God, so.
Well, they all believed in God, but yes.
Well, not the God that we believe in.
Pretty much they did, yeah. This is a tradition that we believe in. Aristotle, especially Augustine and Aquinas, okay?
He didn't believe that God was eternal, Aristotle. He couldn't show that.
Well,
He
again,
didn't believe that we were eternal apart from this existence.
Plato did, and he was a student of Plato, so we have this conversation about how much and how little. Aristotle does, he and Plato too, in their own way. They have this position between polytheism and what we consider monotheism. So it's kind of, but the interesting thing is the Christianized version of Aristotle, and Thomas certainly did.
Mm-hmm.
And Thomas, the way he reads Aristotle, whether that's Aristotle or not, that's another conversation. But if you just had Aristotle and Plato, they would talk about all your natural responsibilities because that's really all they would talk about. However, but remember this about Plato. Plato's main argument for the existence of God is a moral argument. He says, because we do the good when no one is watching, we believe in God. So that may not be the God of the Hebrews, but it's getting very close. Okay, so we'll have this is a conversation. And remember that all the fathers follow Plato, all of them, right? Justin Martyr, Irenaeus, Athanasius, John Chrysostom, certainly Augustine follows Plato, okay? And the entire Middle Ages is built on Augustine. It was required reading for every medieval priest to read Augustine. So you have to understand, Augustine is the dominant intellect of the Catholic Church, even more than Aquinas. Aquinas is kind of a Johnny-come-lately by comparison. So Plato. And Plato's all over the New Testament. You can't avoid it, especially in the Gospel of John and in Paul. It's undeniable. So, and what's in Plato is Apollo. All right, to go back to Nietzsche here, okay? Okay. And if you look at also iconography, the earliest images of Jesus are all Apollinarian, right? Because you have the Father, which is Zeus, and you have the Son, which is Apollo, right? And the Gospel of John says, I am the light of the world. Without me, the world is in darkness. That's a reference to the Son, first and foremost. But it's also a reference to reason and light and the Greek understanding of Apollo. Okay? It's not the same thing, but it is an appeal on the part of the Johannine author to the Platonic understandings of his audience.
But did the Jews understand Neoplatonism? Did they have this understanding of reason?
To some degree, yes. But remember, the church becomes post-Judaic almost immediately, post-Semitic almost immediately. Okay, in most of the world, there are certain exceptions to that. Okay, but in most of the world outside of Palestine, in Syria, it's the Greco-Roman world with emphasis on Greco, but also Roman. Right? You will find, if you want to talk about Judaism and Christianity, you're really going to have to go to the Oriental churches. You know, the weird outliers from a historical point of view. Okay, so one of the arguments, and this is an argument, one of the arguments against that you see also, especially within Protestantism, is pro-Hebrew, anti-Greek, right? But that's not so much pro-Hebrew, anti-Greek as it's just this: pro-sense and anti-reason. That's the move. That's the move that is made by Protestantism. We reject Plato and Aristotle.
Well, and another thing to add in about the Jews is they were all Hellenized.
Sure, of course they were.
I mean, they were all speaking Greek.
Yes, right. And they had some exposure. But his point about Semitic or Hebraic understandings, yes. The Hebraic understanding is much more earthly, much less philosophical, much less reason-based in that sense. But to this day, you talk to Jews, tell me that they're not intellectual. It's ridiculous. That's a comical statement. Of course they are. Of course they are. Now, they might say it's an exaggeration, and that is what it is. But as a matter of historical fact, there are almost no Jewish Christians. So they're not going to have the influence they had in 25 AD or 100 AD. By the time you end of Paul's life, there are more there are more Greek Christians than there are Jewish Christians. Even though he himself is a Jewish Christian, who is also Hellenized. Right? So, there you go.
Yeah, because he was reading the Septuagint.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, he was reading all the
Of course he was,
Greek
yes.
Testament.
That's right. That's right. And they all read Plato. The ones that anyone who could read Plato. That's just what it is.
You're super educated, Paul.
Right. Yes. That's right. And whether you read Plato or not, it's irrelevant because Plato is everywhere in the Greco-Roman world. He is the controlling intellect of the Greco-Roman world. And controlling intellect of the Middle Ages. Okay? One of them. I mean, the fathers too. Okay? I'm not trying to discount the fathers, but remember, all the fathers are Platonized. All of them.
It's crazy because you realize that, like, whenever he was writing those things, those scriptures, he was like pulling from that what people knew.
Of course.
Like the common knowledge.
That's right.
It's amazing.
And all of
to explain Jesus.
Sure. Yeah. That's right. That's right. And one of the early heretical movements, Marcionism, right, wanted to keep the God of the New Testament and to discard the Old Testament. And the objection among the bishops was, well, no, we believe in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, which is also Jesus Christ, right? The Trinity, right? The Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Not just the Son and the Holy Spirit, right? No, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. We come from a Jewish heritage. We're not rejecting our Jewish heritage. We're not rejecting our Jewish God, right? This is the God of the Jews, but he has, deemed us worthy, as Paul says, to be grafted onto the tree, etc., and so forth. So there is that internal tension between the God of the Jews and the God of the Greeks, if you will, in somewhat metaphorically. But remember that Paul was very well aware of Plato and probably to some degree Aristotle. And he employed Platonist language, he employed Platonist metaphors, he employed Platonist dynamics on purpose, okay? And he did so in order to reach his audience, and because truth is one, right? Truth is one. So if you find truth on the other side of the world, from bizarro, weird, whatever strange culture has never heard of Jesus, well, truth is the truth, right? That's the way it is. I mean, I'm going to pull from Chesterton here again. He says when you look at these diverse religions from all over the world, there are all these kinds of crazy and petty gods. But almost always, at the heart of it, almost as a secret, is the one God that rules them all. he always seems to be more silent than the
Like
rest.
Brahmin, Hinduism.
Sure. Like Brahmin and the Great Spirit in Native American religions, these kinds of things. That there's a hint, there's a seed, of this great monotheism in all these different religions.
Well, like the statue with no name and the Areopagus.
That's right. That's exactly right. I was going to go there.
The unnamed God.
The unnamed God, right. The unnamed God.
Sick,
Right? So people can say, well, Plato was just using a rhetorical trick. I'm sorry, Plato. Sorry, Paul was using a rhetorical trick. But I think that's a little bit slanderous. I think Paul was doing what he thought he needed to do. That is, God too has visited you, but you didn't know. Right? And here he is. Right? This unnamed God. Right? And I trust Paul's instincts on this. I don't know if you do. He wrote a fourth of the New Testament. I think he knows what he's talking about. So again, the light in the dark, right? The light in the dark. One of the things that Nietzsche doesn't do, and I'm going to go deep psychology on Nietzsche, is the light in the dark, especially in the Greeks, is not Apollo and Dionysius, right? The counterpart to Apollo is who, right? There's one light to rule the day, and what's the light to rule the night?
Probably Hades, right?
No, what image in the sky rules the night?
The moon.
The moon, right? Who is Artemis,
Artemis.
right? Okay, so you don't have. I would say the true pair is not Apollo and Dionysius, but Apollo and Artemis, the moon goddess, the hunter, right? And that also does man and woman. Right?
It's interesting that Nietzsche's going pagan.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's the pagan side of Augustine and all these people.
Sure.
Because because if you look at Wiccanism and witchcraft,
right,
and this white witch movement,
right,
they worship the moon goddess.
What does it do?
And they look to nature to control nature and the forces of nature for personal gain.
Sure, absolutely.
And like if you do like the yoga, like all those flows, or like they line up with like the moon and the sun and all those different things.
Yep.
Sure.
So pantheism and nature worship, you become God by manipulating nature's powers and secrets.
Sure.
It's a Gnostic sort of.
Absolutely. But remember, Christianity employs the same gods, right? So this is in its own way, but it doesn't call them gods. And it, of course, subordinates it to the one creator God, too. So I talked about that a little bit when you have the movement from the Greco-Roman world, from the Greek pantheon, right, to the one God and the God and the angels, right? So you have this movement. I talked about you personally, Nick, the movement from Mars to St. Michael, right? So that movement is made and it's drawn by the Christians. They want to say, yes, of course there are powers in the heavens, but they all work for one guy. This is him. They're not just this chaos that fights each other. No, it's a kingdom. It's not like this petty civil war going on all the time.
So does Artemis, I don't really look at him much, but does he have like a lot of like chaos in his thing or not?
It's a woman. It's the twin sister. Yeah, twin sister. Paul's twin sister, right? The sun and the moon. That's in a certain way. That's the mythological way of understanding the cosmos,
So
right?
the Christian understanding is Mary and Jesus.
Well, you certainly can talk about man and woman too. There, yes, absolutely.
Because he's the new Adam and she's
The new Eve. Yes, that's right.
So she's the moon to his sun.
That's right.
She only has light because of the sun.
That's right. Yes, so you can do all those things.
That's pretty cool.
You can do all those things. Yes, absolutely. That's right. And again, one of the accusations.
I'm gonna write this down. So Apollo. Sorry, keep going. Apollo and Artemis.
Yeah, Artemis. So, and that's also Apollo in the Latin. It comes straight over, and then it's Diana in the Latin in the Romans, but it's the same goddess.
So Artemis is Diana.
That's right. And Apollo is Apollo. He doesn't change at all. Zeus moves to Jupiter. These kinds of things. But Apollo's so hardcore he doesn't even get a name change, man. He's just like, yeah, Apollo. So this is kind of a side criticism of Nietzsche, but I think Nietzsche's problem with light and darkness, good and evil. Again, good and evil is
so he wrote beyond good and evil.
Sure.
So he's tired of this language.
In some ways, but he likes the forces of chaos over the forces of reason, right?
Because I think that was more. He wasn't really worried about light and darkness. He was more worried. He wanted to be like. He wanted to basically just destroy that and make it just all.
Sure, reason and mystery. Let's go to reason and mystery. That's man and woman too, right? But because Nietzsche is Nietzsche, and I can comment on the sexuality a little bit.
Myth and mystery?
Myth and mystery, right? Yes.
Okay.
That's right. Myth and mystery. So, what did I say? What was my key? I'm sorry.
Reason and mystery?
Yeah, reason is a myth and mystery, right? But myth and reason are, of course, related. Mythos becomes logos, especially in Plato, right? But remember, he wants myth and mystery because, again, Nietzsche is dramatic, right? Back to our title. The drama of atheist humanism, right? Right? In a certain sense, Apollo is not dramatic. Apollo is the resolution of drama, right? The shedding of light on the darkness so you can discern one thing from the other, right? Drama is flow, it's antagonism, it's strife, right? One against the other. You have to have conflict in order for literature to move forward, right? It's not analysis. Analysis is after, that's commentary. But the raw form is the artistic form, the symbolic form, which is unpacked.
So myth versus mystery.
Right.
Myth versus mystery. Myth is Apollo, right?
Right. Right.
And Apollo symbolized reason, order, light,
right.
knowledge.
Sure. All those things. Yes. And the resolution of mythology, right? Or the revelation of mythology. Mythology
also represents, what do you call it? And
teleology?
Yes.
Teleology, right.
Yes.
Look, so mystery is kind of sudden. It's not process-oriented, right? And I never got to this, but let me get back to the register of grace. I think there's the appetitive level, the spirited level, and the intellectual level in the order of grace as well. So I think that's part of what Nietzsche's insight is, that you can go beyond nature and you can tap into supernatural forces. And the line, there's reason at the top, and then again the erotic at the bottom of the level of grace or level of supernature, and thus you get into the positive ecstasies of religion, right? So things like Pentecost, right? You have this it's a very aesthetic existence. It includes lots of senses, right? The music and the tongues and all that stuff is all
but
very
it's a different kind of senses than nature without
right. Sure,
spirit.
Sure, right. That's right. But
it's a spiritual sensuality.
It's a spiritual sensuality.
That's a discernment that happens in the spirit,
sure,
not in the natural.
Sure, right. This is a supernatural register. Yeah, the supernatural register. So I would say on the positive side of Nietzsche, he taps into that. On the negative side of Nietzsche, I don't think he can discern the spirits, and I don't think he understands the difference between good and evil spirits. So
obviously, if he's speaking through an evil spirit, you know what I mean? Taking
that's
he's going demonic, and we're going angelic.
Sure, but I think as the old cartoon has, I think even Nietzsche has a devil and an angel on his shoulders. So there's that too going on with Nietzsche and the use of Nietzsche, especially in this kind of conversation.
Well, Nietzsche does not understand Christianity.
Sure, that's right.
Because my professor even said, Dr. John White, my favorite professor at school, he says to us, I think if Nietzsche actually met a saint who actually loved and lived like supernaturally, he wouldn't have been
well, a big part of his problem was he's Lutheran. He's a Protestant.
If he would have met St. Francis, it would have changed his life.
I agree. I think that's right. I think Nietzsche is I think that Nietzsche is the kind of person who could have been impressed by authentic Christianity. He just never ran into it. At least not in a sufficient amount to impress him.
Right.
Okay. I mean, I'm sure that he ran into his versions of, what Christianity was around him, but he was a very powerful intellect in his own way.
He was also very pessimistic.
Sure, that's right. And to him, everything's a fight. That's the other thing.
Well, nihilism seems to be nihilism because you don't have a cure for your despair.
Right, sure.
And I think that's why Kierkegaard... How could he be a follower of Kierkegaard? So was Nietzsche's cure for despair, like the sickness unto death? Let's just take that.
Sure.
And he was aware of it, Nietzsche.
Sure, yes.
So how did he not see the connection to Jesus? Like, how did he overlook the connection to that God is the way out of this problem?
Because he didn't run into an intellectual, an intellectualist Christian. If he ran into some kind of Dominican with a lot of St. Thomas Aquinas, I don't think he would know what to do with it. Because he ran into Kierkegaard, who doesn't. basically ignores Aquinas. That's another thing with the Protestants. Aquinas does not exist at all. And what exists of Augustine is just is the kind of anti-Platonist Augustine, right? Because Augustine has a lot of passion in him. He has a lot of kind of ecstatic movements, which is, in his case, very positive. But unfortunately, the Protestants like the part of Augustine that says things like that praises the Gospels, but it doesn't like the part of Augustine that says that without the church I wouldn't believe the Gospel, right? So there are two Augustines in that sense, because the Protestant minds the part of Augustine that they like, and they discard the Catholic Augustine, which is all of them, by the way. But that in terms of texts, that's what they do, because they have a more emotional orientation, and they like Luther think that reason betrays them. The problem is, if reason betrays them, then everything else betrays them too.
Well, they're also basing it on some Bible verses.
Sure.
I think they take out of context.
Well, they don't have a system.
Yeah.
They're anti-systematic too, right? They try and reconstruct their system from sola scriptura, but that's a nightmare, right? There's no system.
Once again, you see Protestantism ends in chaos.
Absolutely, there's no doubt about it.
So, yeah,
It's weird how Protestantism is Nietzsche.
That's right. Sure, but we're all Nietzsche in our own way, right?
Yeah. It's hardcore.
Oh, yeah.
But it's not Nietzsche in the sense of evil and darkness. It's just chaotic.
It's Nietzsche in an aspect of skipping your intellect.
Yeah.
Skipping the reason part.
Sure, yeah, and get directly to the ecstasies, right? That's the problem.
Yeah.
Right? So, like I said...
Is that changing on the climate with modern Christians, though? Are some evangelical Christians embracing reason and...
In part, that it has to do with their enemies, right? I mean, we're being pushed towards the Protestants, and they're being pushed towards us because the secularists are pushing all of us out.
Yeah.
So that's part of a kind of political dynamic, if you will.
Well, it seems like even Jews.
Sure, that's right.
Jews as well.
Yeah, but Judaism is tiny, right? And Judaism is already factionalized, unfortunately, beyond almost repair. The number of conservative and especially Orthodox Jews, just almost nothing. Even in Israel, almost everyone's secular, right? And everyone's a Jew.
Well, they're
sort of.
They're Jews. They're kind of like we are Christians. Like everybody's Christian, but they're kind of not.
Right. Well, and that's Kierkegaard's complaint too.